Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, and I am your host, Josh Newberg. Despite the snow and all the cold, we are here to give you guys another episode of the Inside Scoop, and we have a lot to cover. USC, they are on the verge of a massive flip, but Oregon's playing a little defense here. We'll talk some Alabama recruiting, and we'll highlight the best off-field recruiters in America. But first, let's talk a little USC recruiting because the Trojans, they currently have the number 2 ranked class in the country, but Lincoln Riley is eyeing Oregon's top quarterback commit. And yesterday, the flip predictions, they started rolling in on the recruiting prediction machine. And today, in this video, I got USC insider Scott Schrader. We're going to talk about if the Trojans are on the brink of a massive flip. I think they are. Before we get going, USC fans, do me a favor right now. Hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, let's bring in Scott Schrader from We Are SC. As I said, USC has the number 2 class in America. Oregon, they have the number 1 class in America. But the rumors have been swirling around top 10 quarterback Jonas Williams. Scott, he committed in August. But what is this buzz that we're hearing right now around his recruitment?
Yeah, the buzz all kind of started when he showed up on February 1st. I remember getting a text message. I was over at USC kind of waiting for the guys to arrive for a really kind of a big recruiting event. And, and Steve said that Jonas was going to be there and be, among the guys that were visiting. And, that was a complete surprise. Nobody had put his name on any list that I had seen. So, once that happened and then Steve was able to kind of gain some insight on what happened after that, and it kind of appeared that USC was moving into a pretty strong position. And then this morning, Steve and Chad put predictions in for Jonas, and I followed shortly after that. And sounds like this is something that could develop fairly quickly.
Wow. So what is it about Jonas Williams? He's the number 1 player in the state of Illinois, the number 7 quarterback overall. But why is Lincoln Riley zeroing in on Williams?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, because a lot of USC fans anyway were always under the impression that Ryder Lyons was their top quarterback prospect for 2026, and he still is a high priority guy. But the fact that he's going to be taking his Mormon mission after high school, means he will not arrive on a college campus until 2027. So he's kind of viewed as a 2027 quarterback, not 2026.
Right.
So I saw Jonas last summer in Dallas at the OT7, and I hit him up to see if USC was interested back then, and he hadn't really heard anything from them. But it was a school that he said he was going to be interested in, but I hadn't really thought much about him until February 1st. So after that, I went and kind of looked at his film and just kind of gained more insight, more knowledge on what he's what he's like as a quarterback. And I'll tell you what, he is a lot like Caleb Williams. He's got a strong arm. He's accurate throwing on the run. He's really athletic. If you watch the guy run, he's going to be a big time threat in that aspect of the offense as well. So, if you really look at this from a USC perspective, I'm not sure they could find a better fit at quarterback than Jonas Williams.
All right, so we know that USC likes to build around that quarterback commitment. What top wide receivers could this impact with USC recruiting?
These guys don't know each other nowadays, whether they're from the same state or not, as you know, and the guys know who the top quarterbacks are, right? So anytime you get a guy like this where he's going to jump on board and be a part of the recruiting class, it's going to help a lot. So you got some guys locally anyway that they're pursuing. They're hoping to also get back on campus. I know that there's a couple of guys, Vance Spafford, Georgia commit from Mission Viejo, California. He's going to be taking a USC official visit. Caden Dixon Wyatt from Mater Dei, uncommitted, but Oregon and Ohio State have been kind of standing out for him. So that's another guy that USC I think is strongly in the mix for anyway. And he just set up an official visit for June as well. So there are guys they're going to be bringing in here. Spring practices kind of start up on the end of March, and you roll through the official visits in June, and there's going to be several wide receiver targets that are going to be coming in where, this having a quarterback committed matters.
Yeah, especially like you said, they're going to get it done. Well, if they get it done, maybe during this dead period, and then they can roll right into visit season with a top quarterback already committed. So we'll have to see how it all works out.
Yeah.
But do you think that this happens maybe even before the weekend ends?
Yeah, this is definitely something that could pop before the weekends for sure. That's just kind of the vibe I'm getting right now.
All right, Scott Schrader with We Are SC. Sounds like the Trojans are on the verge of a major flip. Let's talk some Alabama recruiting. Today we're focusing on the in-state targets and some of the ones that are at the top of the rankings. Alabama, they're off to a good start. They have one top 10 player in-state committed, elite DB Zion Gibson, but there's some Auburn-Alabama battles brewing for some of these big in-state names, and we got Tim Watts from Bama Online in this video. We're going to go behind the scenes of some of the most important recruiting battles. But first, Alabama fans, do me a favor. Hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We love talking Alabama recruiting. We do it all year long, so jump on board for me, please. All right, let's bring in the great Tim Watts from Bama Online. Tim, we're going to start with some of these big in-state names, so why not start with the number one player in the state of Alabama, Edge Anthony Jones. He is an absolute beast, but there's competition from Alabama. How do you think the Tide stand in this recruitment?
I think they did all they could. I mean, he's been to Tuscaloosa closing in on double-digit visits. He was there February 1st for the juniors that came in. Christian Robinson has done a terrific job building that relationship. The whole staff has been involved. And when you look at him, as a player, this is a guy that can end up anywhere. I mean, he's extremely solid bottom half, could grow anywhere on that defensive line. You see him at edge right now, but he's hovering around 250 already. Just a very impressive athlete, plays a little basketball. Alabama's did a good job, made sure that he was a priority, went down and saw him. I know Christian Robinson, again, has seen him play basketball. There's no doubt he's a priority for them. Alabama's definitely in the mix. I think Texas A&M's a school we hear the most mentioned about. Auburn won't go away easily. But again, still, it's 10 months until signing day, so a lot could change.
All right, now we're looking at the number two player in the state, and he is another beast. 6'5", 210 wide receiver, Sedarian Morgan. He's out of Alexander City, Alabama. I got to imagine he is a big priority for the Tide.
I think a lot of schools have him high on their list. He is that big athletic guy, great with the jump ball. Another guy that's a good basketball player, not surprising. He can stick his elbows in the rim. Alabama's, again, made sure they did their due diligence, went by the school. He was the last visit they had in the January period. He was the very last visit. Kalen DeBoer, most of the staff went there to see him. He came also February 1st for the junior day. So, again, he's the one that's probably less known. I mean, I think Tank's list might be a little bit smaller. Sedarian seems to be a little bit more wide open. Alabama and Auburn, kind of a theme right now with a lot of the top in-state guys. They're both involved. Again, but a lot's going to change between now and June for these guys, in my opinion.
All right, let's go over to Jackson, Alabama. We got 5'11", 200-pound running back Xavier Crowell. Now, he's an interesting story because he was the top running back in the 27 class. He reclassified up to 2026, where he's sitting in the top 10, right there at number 8 at the position. This is going to be a quick recruitment compared to where we thought he was. So where do you see Alabama with this one?
Yeah, he was kind of an afterthought for us. I mean, he was 2027. That was a long ways away. And, enjoyed watching him play, puts up record numbers. And, as far as his ranking goes, I think he's going to push up for number one in his own class, at least be considered in that discussion. They had to make a quick move when he went to 2026.
Yeah.
Again, Alabama's did a good job. They've got him coming in for an official visit. Very interesting. Texas was the school we heard mentioned the most outside of Alabama at the time, and he just announced he was not going to take a visit to Texas. Tashard Choice, the Longhorns running back coach, has left Texas, so that kind of mixed things up, but Alabama's did a good job. Another guy that's been treated as a priority, and his recruiting has skipped up a whole year. I mean, you think you'd be used to it by now with so many guys reclassifying, but it still kind of catches you out of the blue as Kroll did, but a guy that definitely fits in his class and has that skill set similar to other guys we've seen move a year ahead.
All right. The state of Alabama, Tim, is loaded this year. There's one more prospect I want to talk about, though, and he has excellent size as well. That's linebacker Jaquez Wilkes. He goes 6'4", 220 pounds, top 100 prospect overall. Is this a guy that Alabama has a shot with? On3 is honored to announce the next stop of the Next Greatest Generation Tour at Flagstaff High School in Flagstaff, Arizona. In partnership with the Army National Guard, we are proud to recognize Flagstaff High School as a Team of the Year and honor Stephen Dick for his extraordinary selflessness and leadership. In 2023, Stephen Dick suffered a sudden seizure during football practice, leading to the devastating discovery of a brain tumor. As he faced a life-changing diagnosis, Make-A-Wish reached out to grant him a wish, an opportunity to choose something for himself. But Stephen's heart was with his team. Instead of a personal reward, he chose to give back to his teammates, using his wish to provide the Flagstaff football team with 55 state-of-the-art Riddell Speed Flex helmets, ensuring their safety on the football field for years to come. Please join us in congratulating Flagstaff High School on this well-deserved honor and in celebrating Stephen Dick for his incredible act of kindness. We look forward to recognizing the Eagles this Friday night, February 21st, as part of the Next Greatest Generation Tour.
Yeah, I think they do. They still got to get him on campus, and I think that's coming up maybe in the spring, in March. I mean, his film's absurd. It looks like the drunk uncle at Thanksgiving playing with the nephews. He's just throwing people off of him, ragdolling them. He's shoving everybody around at that level he plays at. Obviously, a man among boys really stands out. But an athlete, I think a lot of teams are really enamored with what he could be. But yeah, Alabama's been recruiting him pretty heavily. Want to get him on campus, hopefully in that spring. And last year Alabama made a lot of their recruiting moves in the spring when they saw almost an alarming amount of foot traffic. They had triple digits coming through there, parents, coaches, mentors, along with the prospects. So we'll see more of that this spring. They did a good job of getting ahead because last year they didn't have January. They had that came on late. They didn't have that open season to see the juniors that they did this year. So they're further ahead than they were, but now the spring will still be important for them. It'll especially be important with Wilkes.
Yeah, and you're right. Those spring visits, and there was many of them, those led to those summer commitments for Alabama. You get them on campus once, see everything, they come back with family, and they were committing left and right. So we'll see if that works out for the Tide this year as well. One prospect in the top 10 that I wanted to talk to you about, this is kind of a weird deal, Vodney Cleveland. He was solidly committed to Alabama about 2.5 months ago, decommits, and now he puts out his top schools. Alabama's not even amongst his top schools. What's going on here?
I mean, in hindsight, he obviously wasn't that firmly committed. He decommitted, said he wanted to take visits and all that stuff. I think there's been I don't think there's been a lot of contact from the Alabama end. I think some relationships, with which recruiting still is, just isn't going to work between two teams. I mean, he's obviously a good player. He's got a massive list of schools after him, but I think whatever went down just was kind of a separation point. We say that it's February. He could be on campus tomorrow for all we know. That'd be the dead period. He can't. But during the next live period, so these things change a lot. To me, it's still early to kind of be figuring it out. It was an early commitment, if we're being honest, not really expected, kind of out of the blue when it happened. He had been at Prattville High School, moved to that Birmingham area. So he's had some things going on there. And to me, it's just to be determined. I mean, we see a lot of top 6 lists in February that look totally different in June, and that could go for any prospect in the class.
All right, Tim, let's wrap it up. Talk to Alabama fans. Who do you think could be the next major commitment in the 2026 class?
We've had a few guys that were, Jordan Edmonds is one we've had an eye on. He had a commitment date set and kind of pushed it back. He had construction. When you hear it's pushed back, you automatically, if you've been in this game or covered this game or followed this game long enough, you automatically go to something nefarious happened. But he just couldn't get the setting he wanted in time. It was under construction. He's delayed it. I think he's one that Bama's did a pretty good job with and set in good shape. And another one to watch is Bear McWhirter, who could have a decision here at the end of the month or sometime in the near future. Alabama's in there pretty good. And you're talking about a guy that rose up between his sophomore and junior year. He had quite the glow up.
Yeah, 2 big names out of the state of Georgia. So we'll see if Alabama can capitalize there. But Bama fans, it's all about in-state recruiting. Talk to us. Who do you think is the most important in-state recruit this cycle for Alabama? Let us know. Let's talk 5 college football programs that could be primed to have a monster year after the way they recruited the high school level and the transfer portal. Actually, this is a great article by On3 desk writer Keegan Pope. Shout out to him. We're going to break this down because if you were watching this year's national championship, both teams, Notre Dame and Ohio State, relied on both high-level recruiting at the high school level and finding key additions in the transfer portal. So we know high school recruiting is valid, but without guys like a Will Howard and Caleb Downs or Notre Dame's Riley Leonard, do they make it to the highest point in college football? That's the question. Now we're going to talk about 5 teams that have excelled at both the high school and the transfer portal. So before we get going, guys, smash that subscribe button. All right, let's get to it, and we're going to start with Oregon. They recruited really well at both levels. Number 4 at the high school level, number 4 in the transfer portal index ranking. And Lanning has done a great job of overhauling this complete roster since Mario Cristobal was the head coach. 27 transfers between 23 and 24, but if you look at this year, only 10 this year, and 6 of the 10 were 4 stars in the transfer portal index. So quality over quantity is what I'm seeing in this year's transfer portal class and high school. In the high school recruiting, though, has been on a rise. The Ducks signed 19 players in their high school class, but they had an average ranking of 93.36, the highest in the country. So there were teams that signed more than 19, into 20, 25, 26, 27 guys. Oregon only 19, but the highest average ranking out of anybody else in the country. And that comes on the heels of the nation's number 3 class in 2024. So get ready because the Oregon Ducks aren't going anywhere. All right, let's talk LSU now. Class recruiting ranking at the high school level, 9. Transfer portal index ranking, number 6. Now, LSU's on-field performance last year was not up to the Tigers' standing. That's why Brian Kelly did something about it this offseason. The Tigers went out. They added 16 new players, including multiple projected starters on the defensive line and in the secondary, somewhere they struggled at on the field in 2024. They also managed to majorly upgrade the weapons around Garrett Nussmeier and did so without losing any projected impact players on the current roster. So we all know their current recruiting class lost some of its luster with Cade Phillips and Bryce Underwood flipping, but wait, we're not here to talk about the negatives. They still ended up with a pair of 5 stars and the nation's number 9 class. So from top to bottom, this should be LSU's most talented roster since Kelly took over, and now they just got to go out and prove it on the field. Let's talk Michigan Wolverines. At the high school level, they landed the number 6 class in the nation. Really impressive. Transfer portal index ranking, number 10. And for all the doom and gloom about Michigan's season, yeah, they went 8-5, but they did beat both Alabama and Ohio State essentially without a functioning quarterback room. Their NIL backers saw that. The glimmers of hope in Sharon Moore's first year, it sent them in a tizzy. They went all out and everything changed. It happened about late November. Michigan flipped the number 1 overall player and number 1 quarterback, Bryce Underwood from LSU. Then they went out and they landed elite offensive tackles, Andrew Babalola and Ty Haywood. And at this point, Michigan is cooking on the recruiting trail. They also vastly upgraded their secondary. They got 3 top 100 signees, and we are entering a new era of Michigan football. Let's talk Auburn. They had the number 8 ranked recruiting class at the high school level and the number 9 transfer portal index ranking. So Hugh Freeze's seat is getting warm out there on the plains in his second season. They were sub 500 in both seasons, so you would expect the heat to get up, but man, can he sell. He can sell this program to recruits. Not only did Hugh Freeze land his quarterback of the future in Deuce Knight, flipped him from Notre Dame, but he also signed maybe the highest upside quarterback in the portal, Jackson Arnold. Arnold, he has some weapons around him. Wide receiver 1, Eric Singleton Jr. from Georgia Tech, and then you couple him with Cam Coleman, who's already on the roster, and they have the potential to be very dynamic on offense. So while offense was a big focus in the portal, defense was the name of the game at the high school level. Auburn signed 6 defensive players who rank among the top 150, regardless of position, and all of them hail from the state of Alabama. They dominated in-state recruiting. Let's see what they can do on the field this year. Lastly, we got Texas A&M. High school ranking, number 7, transfer portal index, number 8. And I would say proof of concept was there at multiple points during Mike Elko's first year in College Station, but his team lacked depth. especially on offense, and they really have to get it put together. They got the pieces in order because the Aggies, they found their QB of the future in Marcel Reed. They're going to build around him, and that's what they did this offseason. They signed one of the best transfer portal classes on offense. Wide receiver Kevin Concepcion, Micah Hudson. They added to the tight end room with Amari Niblack. They went all out in the portal. They also signed another top 10 recruiting class headlined by 5-star wideout Jerome Miles at the high school level and 5-star offensive tackle Lamont Rogers. The Aggies roster is absolutely loaded, so it's time to see what Mike Elko can do. You tell me, what do you think of some of these portal classes and high school classes combined? Did we miss anybody? I think Colorado's worth a mention here. We know Coach Sanders is going to go out and get some of these high school guys to come in and play right away. He hits the portal hard, and you're seeing even more balance at Colorado. Not as many transfer portal guys as when Coach Prime arrived. Florida State's another program. They live and die by the portal as well. They had a great portal class, not as well at the high school level, but the expectations are high this year. You guys talk to me. Let me know. Comment section below. Who do you think is primed to make a run in 2025? Let's talk a little recruiting. And I got my guy, Steve Wiltfong, sitting next to me. And we're going to break down what it takes to sign a top class. Because, Steve, it's not all about NIL and visits. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. And there's some unsung heroes in college football recruiting that I want to talk about. Let's start at Texas, because Texas Longhorns finished with the #1 class in 2025, and they are cooking on the trail in 2026. Take us behind the scenes. Who is kind of responsible for the organization, and who's the engine behind this Longhorn recruiting?
Well, at the Personnel Symposium this past year in Nashville, you call them unsung heroes, but these are some of the most important people in college football, and head coaches are they know it, and these folks are starting to be compensated correctly. And you had Alabama's Courtney Morgan, Texas Tech's Joey Blanchard, and Texas's Brandon Harris standing together. And I walked over to those guys and said, "Here's Millionaires Row right here at the Personnel Symposium." And Brandon Harris did a little right electric slide type move to get off the avenue, Texas's general manager. Well, he can slide right back in because, obviously it was reported at the end of January that Brandon Harris got compensated well. I don't know the exact figures, nor am I all up in his business, but I'm very excited for him that he got a huge raise, because he deserves it. He runs the recruiting department at Texas and has his finger on every component of that, from on-campus recruiting to the scouting board to courting players to come to the university, and being the direct line of communication for so many important factors to that program. He was awarded, and Texas is bringing in the #1 ranked recruiting class this cycle, and it's under his leadership. And certainly they have some great coaches that help recruit, but they need the support system to do that. And when you talk to anyone around the Texas program, it's not just about Brandon, and he's quick to deflect that as well. Director of recruiting Taylor Searles, Director of Player Personnel John Michael Jones, Director of Recruiting Ops Kendall Perry, Recruiting Coordinator Jordan Mitchell, Assistant Director of Player Personnel Jackson Gleason, and then Jimmy Youngblood, who's also got the same title. They're an army. They work together extremely. Look, they work together extremely well. There's a lot of cohesion in that group. There's a lot of people in that group that are eventually going to run their own shop. Mm-hmm. But right now, it's Brandon Harris leading the way. He was our top off-field recruiter this recruiting cycle, general manager at Texas, #1 ranked recruiting class. And they had some massive recruiting wins, getting Lance Jackson in the fold early, 5-star edge. They always led for Khalik Lockett, 5-star receiver, but they had to rally for Jonah Williams. They had to get him to campus at the end of summer, steal that lead from Texas A&M, Oregon, A&M, Oklahoma, LSU, all programs that were at one point in better position than Texas for Jonah Williams. Justice Terry, the late recruiting win, that was a lot of work. Cade Phillips, they flipped Cade Phillips from LSU on 5-star corner. So Texas bringing in the #1 ranked recruiting class in the country. Salute to Brandon Harris and that terrific off-field recruiting team in getting it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Texas, incredible run in 2025. And like I said, they're already after in 2026. Now, let's talk a little bit about Ohio Ohio State recruiting because the Buckeyes are coming off that national championship. Yeah, they finished number 5 in the 2025 rankings, but they had a bunch of top classes that kind of all culminated in that national championship. And general manager Mark Pantoni has a big hand in that. You've known Mark Pantoni for a while. What is it about what he does that makes Ohio State great?
Well, he's the industry standard. I mean, he is the great leader. That was one of Urban Meyer's first 2 hires when he got to Ohio State. He hired his DFO, then he hired Mark Pantoni.
Actually, he brought Mark Pantoni from Florida, where he was working for him for a couple years with the Florida Gators.
Exactly right. So Mark Pantoni came up as a student assistant at Florida. First, Coach Adazio was the offensive line coach. That was kind of the first person that he impressed, where he was starting to get a voice at Florida. And by the time Urban Meyer's time ended at Florida, he was one of his most trusted staffers of hey, what are we doing with Florida Friday Night Lights? Who are we recruiting? Who's our board? How are we attacking? Who are we hiring on staff to help us do all of that? So at one point, Luke Fickell was the interim coach at Ohio State. And then in a little wing off to the side, you had Urban Meyer, Mark Pantoni, and I forget the DFO's name. But so Urban Meyer was really one of the first coaches to prioritize that position. Yeah. And Mark Pantoni was huge in Ohio State winning their national championship 10 years ago, and he was pivotal in the Buckeyes winning their national championship this year. He's in every conversation. He's who Ryan Day leans on for any kind of counsel for how they're going to handle their recruiting department, NIL department. And when you talk about a guy that's a potential, should have $1 million salary, and you see an opening at Notre Dame right now.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, Notre Dame, they're shooting 69 on the golf course. They're trying to shoot 67. Mark Pantoni can get you to 67.
Yeah.
And so I would take a run at Mark Pantoni if I'm Notre Dame. And there's no question that Marcus Freeman knows Mark Pantoni. He went to Ohio State.
Right,
exactly. So that would be target numero uno for me, as Notre Dame has an open general manager spot in South Bend. And then Ohio State, I would just dude, let's just get you locked in even longer, man, because he's as important. And then he leans on a lot of people there too, man. So, recruiting assistant Parker Webb, Ryan Mayhew, those are guys that they speak highly of around that building. Morgan Phillips is their director of football recruiting and events, and then Nick Murphy and Garen Duhart. They've helped Ohio State recruit a lot of great players over the last cycle, retain players. They've had to battle to keep guys in the fold, but Mark Pantoni is one of the godfathers of off-field recruiting personnel, and he's as valuable to any football staff as there is in the country.
All right. Any other off-field names that you think fans need to recognize right now across the country?
Yeah, obviously at Alabama, number 3 ranked class in the country, Courtney Morgan, Kalen DeBoer leans on him as much as Ryan Day leans on Mark Pantoni. He's a guy that helps Alabama recruit coast to coast, a really good identifier of talent. Marshall Malchow, a similar role at Oregon. He's worked with Dan Lanning at Georgia before. Marshall Malchow has worked for Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Chris Peterson, Jimbo Fisher, and now Dan Lanning. So
he's seen it all.
He's worked for championship coaches with different personalities. He's involved in the scouting. He's involved in the NIL discussions. He's involved in everything similar to Mark at Ohio State. He does the same thing at Oregon. Some electric off-field recruiters that help. It's their job to help lure in talent. David Cooper at Georgia. If you're on a visit at Georgia, you feel David Cooper.
Right.
I mean, he's leading the photo shoots, the energy. He's at the door, brings so much juice. He's a Georgia native that played linebacker at Indiana that has helped Georgia close out so many high-end recruiting battles. And then over at Auburn, another top 10 class. You don't have a top 10 class if you don't have Kenyatta Watson on your staff.
For sure. He's been around for a while.
He was the lead recruiter on Deuce Knight. 5-star quarterback, flips from Notre Dame to Auburn. He's involved in so many other recruitments, particularly out of the state of Georgia, but he was humongous in Auburn landing Deuce Knight. Already has Auburn getting ahead in this 2026 class as they look for a 3rd straight top 10 class. And Hugh Freeze said, hey, when you look at past SEC champions, the one thing that they all had in common is 3 straight top 10 recruiting classes. So as he puts his roster together, he's going to combine 2026, 2025, and 2024. Now, a lot of that was before pre-portal era, so you got to retain these top 10 classes, but so far so good. But so many guys. There's an article on On3 talking about the top 25 classes. I could have went all the way down because it's such a valuable position. So many key off-field recruiting staffs out there in the country that do terrific work. Tyler Barnes at Iowa, to name someone not in the top 20. Top 25, Matt Wilson at Indiana. Those are just a couple guys that are at the top of their game as well.
Yeah, always interesting to go behind the scenes and kind of find out who are the people that make recruiting go at some of these top programs. Steve, thanks for your intel.